Give it to me. Give it to me. Yeah, now in the icon. Give it to me. No. Don't disconnect. That's the icon that tells you something is going on. We're going live, sir, in 2 minutes, in 3 minutes. We're going to be streaming on several platforms like Facebook. I already sent the links to you, but you probably can't watch it because of the feedback. But we're starting in 2.5 minutes. I didn't see the coffee, sir. I said I didn't see the coffee.
Paying for online church.
That's fine. We're not human. Okay. I guess we've all become like our own water suppliers. We've become our own energy suppliers. Now we're our own broadcasters. Are you going to start with the split screen? Start with me solo, okay? I'll just pin this thing. Okay, there's a lot of sensitivity to some of to your equipment. Your mic, okay, it's fine. It's a bit.
Good morning, Pastor. Good morning, Mr. Abikoye.
Good morning.
Hello, good morning, ma'am. How are you?
Very well, thank you. And you?
Very good, Lusanga. Very good.
Should be joining me this morning. That's Mr. Fataroti to help me through some questions at you from different perspectives. So,
from what perspective?
Okay, we're starting now. All right.
Okay.
Okay, good morning everybody. I'm sorry I was looking at the wrong screen. This is the Bridge Network. Good morning, welcome. Today is almost so many days into this new lifestyle that we have. I'm very excited this morning because we're going to be having more or less an interactive service. And so please be with us. Let's just pray this morning as we acknowledge God, because without Him we are nothing. Without Him we can do nothing. Father, we do acknowledge you, we do bless you, we do lift up this day before you. thank you that Scripture tells us, it assures us that this is the day you have made, and we will be glad and will rejoice in it. And we realize it's not just today that Scripture is talking about. We know it means more than that, but this is the season, this is the period, this is the age that you have made, and we will be glad and we will rejoice in it. Our Father and our God, we do acknowledge you, we do bless you, we do ask for your help. Now, oh God, that even the whole world is in confusion, even the whole world is scared. Now, even now, when we're worried, when we're concerned about the things that are going on around us, our Father and our God, we're depending on you. We're depending on you to direct our government. We're depending on you to direct the people. We're depending on you to direct us. We're depending on you to direct the church. This morning, oh Lord, help us. Help us and help this nation. Help the nations of the earth. Help us to make sense out of all this. You have that wonderful ability of getting glory out of everything you do. So this is not an exception. It's with confidence that we put our hope in you. It's a confidence we put our faith in you. Thank you, Father. Thank you, O Lord Jesus. We pray. Thank you, Lord Jesus. We give you praise. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Yeah, this morning we have a very special guest, Mr. Bode Abikoye. He's going to be talking to us and sharing some of his experiences with us. I don't want to, he's going to be with us for both services, that's this particular service and the one we're going to have after. Today, at the Real Success Seminar, we normally focus on business, on relationship, on attitude development. We speak about leadership, we talk about entrepreneurship, and we talk about all the things that have to do with business. And the theme we felt led to go on this month is about reinventing yourself at a time like this. And when I look through Mr. Abikoye's CV, I see some peculiarities. He went to University of Ilorin, he studied agriculture there, and so on and so forth, and he's made some major reinvention of his own life over the years, and has risen up to until recently to be the size of the regional executive at Union Bank, and also executive director of Bank of Industry until recently. So what I want to just throw at Mr. Abikoye immediately without wasting time is, sir, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Great.
Good morning, sir.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you very much for having me.
We want to, I'm really trying to pick your brain. When you started in agriculture in the Ilorin, you had no idea that Nigeria was going to put a lot of focus on agriculture, or did you, before you started going in that direction?
I actually didn't go into Ilorin to study agriculture.
Okay.
I went into Ilorin to study zoology.
Really?
But I had a troublesome cousin who was studying engineering, and he would typically jibe at me and say that when we all graduate, that he will be called engineer so and so, and I will be called Bode. That was one of the things that prompted me for a change of course. I changed to agriculture.
Okay.
That was back in 2000, and that was back in 1986. And subsequent to that, when I got out of university, it wasn't really a choice whether I wanted a job in banking and financial services, which eventually I found myself in. My involvement in banking at the time was because at that time it was mainly the oil and gas sector that was recruiting the engineering students,
okay,
and the banking industry was recruiting everybody.
All right.
So I got into banking because it was what was available at the time. But after I got into banking, I started getting more interested. I don't know whether it is the job or the look of bankers at the time. They were always sharply dressed, and I am somebody in that direction. I like to look good. So I went on to work in agriculture, to work in banking. But then back in 2005, when the banking consolidation was happening, I was branch manager in one of the branches of the bank in Ibadan. And I had younger folks working with me. Well, not young in terms of age, but in terms of rank. And we would sit down. Everybody was taking the HSMP to go to UK. We were collecting this form and that form. But somehow I had peace. And my colleagues were asking me what exactly my confidence was about all of this. And I said to them that it was that I was sure that there was not going to be mass loss of jobs, like everybody envisaged, and that in having that assurance, I also believe that it was no longer going to be a generalist market. So somewhere before the consolidation, this concept of marketing officers in banking as against banking officers became introduced into the market. So it became a question of how many checks you could get into the bank at any point in time. And that was how people got promoted. Now, there is a difference between a marketing officer and a banking officer. A banking officer is somebody who understands what has to be done and why it is being done. I was trained in one of the much older banks, and I don't, though it is defunct now, I'm actually proud to say I was trained in Trans International Bank, because at the time we used to calculate financial ratios using a form. So it is not now that folks would impute statistics into a database, and it will then roll out everything. We actually calculated it by hand, and you needed to be able to interpret it. So there was some technical capacity behind me from working in that institution, and subsequently in a number of other institutions. So it became clear to me that it was going to be, because the banks were going to become bigger, and because the banks were going to require people who had technical capabilities and less of people who could bring in the checks, because the checks will work to them now. Okay. I was confident that if I could bring technical capacity to the table, then it was unlikely I would lose the job. But in doing that also, it became clear to me that, so you are now technically competent. What then am I looking for you for? There are probably 1,000 of other people who have taken the pains to become technical competent. What distinguishes you? So at that time, I decided I was going to focus my career on infrastructure and agriculture. And while I have done a couple of transactions in the infrastructure space, I've done much more in agriculture, both nationally and on the continent, as well as in some other areas of the world.
Yeah, thank you very much. You have some extraordinary accomplishments, and there was a unique program you did with is it Union Bank? Yeah, with Union Bank on Agric, which I think is second to none, where you guys structured out the entire value chain of agriculture and had to teach the whole nation about why schools, storage, and all that were important. And we saw that, and you shared that with us in church a couple of years ago when you came to visit. The question I want to ask you now, with this current coronavirus and its impact not just on the banking sector but even on the agric sector, how should we approach what is happening? And the reason why I wanted to talk about your career was you've always had this ability to adjust wherever you find yourself. What kind of adjustment should we be looking at? Don't forget, you're talking to lay people like myself, and you're also talking to professionals in some cases. So what advice would you give us right now as we're coming out of this coronavirus issue and the crashes that have already happened and the ones that are still going to happen and the opportunities that are going to be available?
Well, the first thing I'll say is that in whatever circumstance you find yourself, you must be able to read your environment. You must understand the interplay of the various factors that are being presented by the environment. And when you interpret that, you must also try to get to the future before the future happens. So what do I see? In very simple terms, I don't see any need for a country with a population of 200 million people, which says there's an available retail market. So anything we can produce can most likely be sold. We have a youth bulge of about 35% of that 20 million people. They are going to require jobs.
Yeah.
We have food importation that's about $3 billion per annum presently. We are going to need to feed those 200 million.
It's still that high, even with all the achievements we've done in agri.
Well, when you look at there are achievements in agriculture, certainly, but there are still a lot of things that we need to fix. Productivity in agriculture is about efficiencies. It's about how much yield are we getting? Are we able to produce all year round because we have irrigation? We don't. Do we have sufficient mechanization that is going to make to take away the drudgery of what's it called? We don't. We have 6.6 tractors per 100 square kilometers in Nigeria. Do we have good roads to be able to take the produce from the rural areas to the urban markets? We do not. Do we have a good way by which our farmers access markets? So the challenges are much. Yes, we've made, particularly in areas like rice, yes, we've made substantial progress on the primary production side, but we still need to catch up on the on the processing side, as well as on the access to markets. Our financing models need to become more efficient so that it can include more rural farmers under terms and conditions that they can actually meet to be able to access finance. So yes, we have that much in terms of we've made progress, but we still have a long way to go. But like I was saying, what I see is we have a huge population, a youth bulge of about 35% of 200 million that is mostly unemployed right now. So I see opportunities for us to create jobs. We have lost a lot of revenues from the downturn in the oil market, which is our mainstay in terms of foreign exchange earnings. So we're going to have less money to import food.
Yeah.
So whether we like it or not, this is Ramadan. We just finished Lent. Even at Ramadan and in Lent, when people break their fast, they still need to feed. They still need to have sahur in the morning before we with what's it called. So I see opportunities to create jobs. I see opportunities for us to ramp up our primary production. I see opportunity if we do not want to lose what we gain in terms of primary production. I see opportunity for an industrialization of Nigeria based on agriculture as a primary driver. I see opportunities for us because Nigeria is perhaps the largest country in sub-Saharan Africa. So definitely in the region we belong to, the West African region. Yeah. I see opportunities. I see we are the largest too. So I see opportunity for actually also building an export market, because if we are going to be as hard hit as we envisage we will be, then the smaller countries around us who will not be able to access the international markets where they used to import stuff from can look to Nigeria as a source. So I also see export opportunities. I see a lot of opportunities in us being able to build our SME markets. So my response to you typically, sir?
What is SMP? I don't know.
Oh, small and medium enterprise markets.
Okay.
Because that is the growth engine. It is the organization that is from 1 to 200 people. They are usually what we call the smallholders. Okay. If we empower them, because they constitute about 67 to 70% of our workforce in Nigeria today, if we are able to empower them, they are going to create fantastic multipliers within our domestic economy. And those multipliers are going to add to jobs, they are going to add to income, they are going to add to wealth creation, they are going to add to revenues for government in form of taxes, and all that. So just to answer your question in a much more roundabout way, yes, the global pandemic is with us. Yes, it may not go away, but what do we see as a people? Do we see the threat that we can go out and we can catch this virus and probably die? At the end of the day, we all die anyway.
Yeah.
But what exactly are we seeing? Are we also seeing the opportunities, and are we averting our minds to being able to take advantage of those opportunities?
All right. Can I'm going to throw a bit of a spanner in before I allow people to start asking you questions in a minute. Everybody, we always have this default position: government, 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 government. Government should do this. I notice you haven't said that in your statement since you started. Government should do this, government should do that. Because if anything fails, we're going to turn around and say it was government's fault. But how would you see maybe the private sector, or you and I, what can we do to get involved in this? I like what you said about the fact that we have a domestic market, which is something that we've ignored for very, very long, which is why we keep importing things and reselling it to Nigerians. We've never looked at our domestic market the same way. Do you think we'll be able to do that now? Whether or not we see the kind of excellence or rethink in the government that we're expecting, what would you say to that?
Well, I'll answer that question in two ways. Government has patronized the Nigerian people for too long, giving them the impression that succor can only come from government.
Yeah.
And we go about creating all these intervention windows that when you look at it from a very critical perspective, and you consider the deficits that we have in our economy for the finance of a lot of sectors, the intervention windows we create are not sufficient to be able to meet that deficit. Yes. I'm aware, for example, that the deficit for agricultural finance in Nigeria today is there about 1.5 trillion.
Wow.
Now, 1.5 trillion, we have created a number of funds, but none of them is up to 1 trillion naira.
Wow.
I'm talking about the agriculture space now. None of them is up to 1 trillion naira.
Yeah, okay.
So when government gives the impression that we are going to fund agriculture and you can access this, instead of folks sitting back to look at the quantum of what is being provided and the deficit that is required to be funded, they concentrate on scrambling for the little that is available without looking internally for self-help. I want to credit government, particularly central bank, which has been intervening so steadily in the national economy to ensure that there is access to finance in certain critical areas. But I also want to begin to charge us as the people. How many sectors can government fund? I just spoke about the deficit of finance in agriculture alone. What is the deficit in infrastructure? What is the deficit in healthcare? What is the deficit in education? What is the deficit in communication? If government were to continue to create these windows, and they call it ways and means, what we are going to do is to begin to fund inflation. We cannot afford that. But let me take us back to 1935, 1958. Cocoa House, and we are in Ibadan. Cocoa House over there was built from the proceeds of cocoa. NTA was built from the proceeds of whatever the Western region was generating at the time. So it was WNTV at the time. Was built from whatever proceeds. Now, all of those were founded on the back of the cooperative movement. The cooperative movement in Nigeria dates back to 1935. They started their own bank in 1958, and in 1962 they came under Western Nigerian laws. In 1962 they came under the regulation of the central bank and had a cooperative bank. Now, how does a cooperative operate? Folks make contributions into a common pot, and everybody can come to borrow from that pot.
Okay.
What have they done? Instead of waiting for government or anybody to fund them, they have resorted to self-help. Today there are about 16 million cooperators in Nigeria, in 124,500 cooperatives. Now, if you take simple arithmetic and you say, let's have each of them contribute 500 naira out of 60 million people, that's 30 billion naira.
Wow. Yeah.
So who's rethinking the models that we believe is what should be? Government cannot do anything. Typically, government should not be intervening in the economy. It should be private sector led for reasons of efficiency and a lot of other things that we shouldn't go into right now. But typically, government should just be creating the environment. So we have spoken about inefficiencies in agriculture. I mentioned the roads that will take it in. If government was not funding agriculture and funding education and funding healthcare by itself, then it will have money freed up to be able to look at areas of infrastructure and things like that will now enable the private sector to drive its own business. So look at it as infrastructure and rolling stock. Government should provide infrastructure while the private sector provides rolling stock. The private sector does not need government to find access to finance for it to do its own business. So I think one of the things we should be rethinking is the financing models. You will excuse me, I was brought up by a Yoruba teacher. The Yoruba say, it means that money said that if he's not at home, nobody should contemplate anything behind him. So we'll continue to identify the problems. We'll continue to write the thesis on what the solution should be. But if we do not go out of looking at government to be able to raise capital to do it, if we do not resort to building self-help models that can actually accrete capital and enable us to finance what needs to be financed, then we are going to stay at the same point waiting for government. And government doesn't have money right now. I think the benchmark oil price that is being adopted was for this budget this year is now $25, down from 57. So it means that government will have to finance much less from the minimal resources it has.
Then you have the current expenditure anyway, so that's the problem.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to stop a little bit, and because eventually my last question to you will be about applying it to our life. But let me see if anybody has any questions. Ms. Fatoriti, do you have anything you want to ask?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Abikoye. He's given a very enlightening talk, and I'm entirely in agreement with him that the main function of government is to create an enabling environment. It's the environment, the focus of that, indeed, ordinary folk like you and I, should be able to pick up the gauntlet and do what we ought to do in terms of, causing the economy to work and all that. Having said that, I just want to say to him that, okay, we, for ordinary folk like us, we're not high-powered bankers, how you've spoken in a very broad way, really, about the opportunities that are available. But I was hoping for something a bit more specific so that we can take from it and, we can literally take something and run at our level. Because I have, for instance, of course, I can use myself as an example. I have absolutely no knowledge, no experience in agric at all. However, agric, like they say, is the new oil. One had better just get involved, if only at a micro scale. So where would I start from? I have no idea what to.
Okay, let's were you able to hear her?
Yes, I did.
Okay,
yes, I did.
Yeah.
I think adopting that approach would be wrong, not knowing what your capacities are. When people talk agriculture these days, I prefer to talk agribusiness, because like Pastor mentioned earlier on, it is a value chain. All of them at this point in time, because if you don't integrate that value chain, you are not going to have the efficiency gains that will translate to profit. And all of those segments they present opportunities at a time like this. So the guy in agri-logistics can see an opportunity. The guy in the processing of agricultural commodities can see an opportunity. The guy who owns a warehouse where farmers can deposit their goods so that they don't lose them post-harvest can see an opportunity. The guy who is importing and distributing agrochemicals can see an opportunity. But it will be wrong. And when we talk about the size of that market, it's what's it called? It's huge at 200 million. When we talk at 200 million people, if we use the cooperative movement as an example, 20% of that 60 million, that's 12 million people, are in primary production in agriculture. So it means they will need fertilizer, they will need agrochemicals, they will need animal feed, they will need medicaments for their animals, and stuff like that. So it's difficult to say this is where the opportunity is, because the opportunities are actually everywhere. Anyway, so the question will be, like I said, it is not just about reading your environment. It is also about understanding yourself and understanding what your strengths are. So who are you and what do you know your capabilities are? If you look at those capabilities and you profile the value chain, you can begin to identify the areas in which you can play based on your background, your environment, whatever knowledge you have, whatever amount of capital. Because some areas, if for example you had 1 million naira and you say you want to go to agro processing, I'll think about it twice. If you had 100 million naira and you say I want to start a gari milling plant, I want to be able to mill maize as grits for the breweries or for the or for the conflict manufacturers, that will be so it depends on what your own internal capacities are in terms of what is your knowledge, what skills you have, what attributes you have that speaks to it. So to answer you directly, Ma, I think it will be situational to say this is where somebody should go. Because if I tell you today that they are making money in poultry, and you go and start a poultry, and Gomboro attacks the birds, it will be that is that bald-headed guy that came to speak at our church event that asked us to do poultry. So I think it is going to be a function of what you read of the environment and what internal capacities you think you have.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Just the last time you spoke, I actually thought about the aspect of the value chain that has to do with logistics, and even narrowing that down about preservation along the value chain. I've always wondered about, okay, how do tomatoes stay good, and is there an intervention that one can introduce between the farm and possibly, the purchaser? Yeah. Because I thought about that. I thought about what about something like a cooler room, an ice room, or something like that, cooling facility. But to be candid, the whirlwind of life sort of. I just thought about it. I never did anything about it. What do you think about that?
I think it makes a lot of sense. Depending on the commodity that you are looking at today, our farmers lose anywhere between 40 and 60% of what they labor for over a planting season post-harvest. Post-harvest loss management is primarily about two things. It's about appropriate storage. It is also about ability to process. Now, some things are easier to approach than others. Like I said, if you were to set up a processing plant today, particularly if you were to import the equipment in these uncertain times, you really can't say how much it's going to cost you until the factory is installed, because foreign exchange rates have spiked and stuff like that. But we have local capacity that can build cold storage, and Nigeria has a deficit in both dry and cold storage right now. A couple of years ago, the USAID funded a project known as the Lakaji Corridor, and Lakaji stands for Lagos, Kano, and Tibia. It's a corridor that is traced from northern Nigeria up to and cold storage. Right years ago, we funded a project. Okay. So it's a corridor that is traced from northern Nigeria up to Lagos. Now, along that corridor, farmers are producing and losing money on a daily basis. What somebody should be looking at is who puts cold storage. Presently, Nigeria has about 10,000 cubic meters. Cubic meters of cold storage. A country like Botswana has 40,000. We're 200 million people. They are much smaller. So who is looking at that now? If you were to look at the fact that you are moving things like tomatoes down from the north to the south, from Lagos upwards, there is always going to be custom for such an enterprise. But I know that Mrs. Ifatuoti is a rich woman, but should I then advise Mrs. Ifatuoti to concentrate on building a cold chain across the Lakaji corridor? It probably would not work. But if Mrs. Ifatuoti lives in Ibadan and is able to go to Okiogun, where farmers can produce cassava and maize and yam and stuff like that, what stops Mrs. Ifatuoti, which also suffer post-harvest losses, what stops Mrs. Ifatuoti from focusing on that area? Somewhere in the Oyo area, there is actually some pepper and some other horticulture being produced. So what stops Mrs. Ifatuoti, for example, from owning a warehouse? And I'm not saying she should do a silo, because that will then be, we should categorize ourselves according to the size of our clothes. And it is not to deprecate, it is just to say it is the resources that are available to you that will dictate what you can do. But if Mrs. Ifatuoti were to set up a warehouse in Okiogun or Ibarapa today, and let farmer cooperatives know that when you produce maize, I'm available to buy. What she needs is a warehouse. She can have pallets on the floor and begin to stack it. So going back to just narrowing it down to the question you asked, my idea would be to scan your environment and look at farmers that have a need or that have a challenge with post-harvest losses, and look at the simplest way by which you can provide that. It could be a cold room for fish farmers. It could be a warehouse for the farmers of maize. It could be a yamba in Okiogun, for example. I'm narrowing it down to Okiogun because we are in Ibadan. But what I'm saying is, what you need to do is, you don't need to look at the whole market and the entire requirements of the market to fix these aspects of the challenge that we face. But if you can localize it to a farmer group that has a need, because one of the reasons our farmers are not making as much money is that they are pressured to sell at harvest because they don't have storage facilities. So look at farmer groups that have those needs and let them focus on farming. Or you focus, that is their own competence. It is about risk sharing. Let them carry the risk that they are able to carry, and let us now have you come in and provide them with those things that they don't presently have, and try to do that at the least.
All right, thank you very much. Abikoye's hand is on, but I thought Pastor Lumide wanted to ask something about cooperatives. Is that true?
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir.
Mr. Kuchian, we'll come to you.
Morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Abikoye. It's nice having you, sir.
Yes, sir.
You spoke about cooperatives, which I've been working on for quite some time, especially in looking at cooperatives just beyond the farming to accessing the value chain as you've spoken about. One of the challenges over the years is the fact that, like you also said, is the fact about government intervention, whereby people now no longer want to make the voluntary and personal contributions in cooperatives to begin to look at loans as national cake from government, which in a sense is also killing and affecting the efficiencies and effectiveness of cooperatives on one hand. And then secondly, again, especially in recent times, just about some couple of years back, when even government-based cooperatives, that's for civil servants, whereby government will take their funds from their salaries but will not remit it into their cooperative account. So all this, in a nutshell, has in a way affected the outlook of what cooperatives are. I just want to ask from you, what do you think we could do as a way forward, especially from the backdrop of all these challenges, amongst other challenges that cooperatives, especially in the farming sector, are faced, and how can we push forward? Thank you, sir.
Okay, there are two. Let me just give you some numbers. The cooperative movement that I have come to study is a very efficient system. Extremely efficient in the sense that there are two categories of cooperatives. There are what you call the industrial cooperatives, which are the ones that are for people working in a certain area. Then there are the orthodox cooperatives. Those are the ones like the ancestors of this world that have been around since forever, and there is a definite structure around how they run. Now, those cooperatives still exist. The membership still exists. It is modernization and our own generation not taking the pace of understanding the cooperative movement. That is what has brought all of the challenges. Like I said, you need to begin to partition cooperatives and look at them from the perspective of what is each group supposed to be serving as a function. So of the 124,500,000 that I said exist, 20% of them are farmer cooperatives. The next 10%, those ones are in the processing of agricultural commodities. Those are the ones that used to exist a long time ago. They still are available now, but the folks who are part of it need younger blood to come into them, so that we can begin to look at how we help them to also carry on with the times. Then the balance of 70%, they are the credit and thrift societies that necessarily fit into a marketing function for whatever is coming from the first two. So what you need to do is to determine what your cooperative is meant to serve, and then sit down amongst yourself, come up with something, and approach the director of cooperatives. Because it's okay for us to say we are a cooperative, but how are you structured that makes you efficient as a cooperative? Approach the director of cooperatives and get it registered properly. Get somebody that has an understanding of the cooperative movement to look at the bylaws for you and ensure the bylaws serve the purpose you say you want it to serve. Then approach the state apex, because all cooperatives in a state are meant to belong to a state apex. Now, at that apex, there are two relevant apexes that you need to relate to. You need to relate to the state apex for the Cooperative Federation of Nigeria. You also need to relate to the state apex of the National Cooperative of Nigeria. So when you look at it, maybe you put yourself into a cooperative of 50 people, and you say to folks that they need to contribute 1,000 naira each. If you multiply 1,000 by 4, that gives you 4,000 naira. If you multiply 4,000 naira by 50, that will give you somewhere around 20,000 naira. It means amongst you, what you can raise is 100,000 naira a month. Now, of that 200,000 naira, if 5 people out of the members of the cooperative have needs, Abi, will that 200,000 finance it? No. The straight answer is that no, it will not.
No. Yes.
Now,
no.
The idea of the cooperative movement is about synergies. If your own cooperative can raise 200,000 naira, imagine we say the 60 million cooperators across the country should put in 1,000 naira each. That will give us 60 billion naira. If what you need is 130,000 naira to be able to farm 1 hectare of maize, then it is easier for you to be able to access funding. That is the power of the collective. That is why it is called a cooperative. We are cooperating to be able to arrive at an end. So my advice to you will be, please identify what the purpose of your cooperative is supposed to be. Go ahead and formally approach the Director of Cooperatives in the Ministry of Trade and Industry to register that cooperative. And then go on ahead and register with the Cooperative Federation of Nigeria and become a contributing member. It then becomes easier for us to begin to build those models. But you see, it is very easy for us to be distracted by the challenges that face us, rather than to actually look those challenges in the face and say, this is my strategy for surmounting them. But I think the cooperative movement works. I think it's a veritable avenue, and it's been proven. Cocoa House stands there. It was built on the back of the cooperative movement. The commodity boards were built on the back of the cooperative movement, and they did a lot for Nigeria in terms of foreign exchange earnings in those days.
All right, thank you. I want to take Mrs. Okutiang, and then we can now start rounding up. Mrs. Okutiang, are you still there? Mrs. Okutiang.
Hanging. Okay. Hello, sir.
Morning, ma'am. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your wealth of experience with us this morning. My area is in terms of education. I realized that in terms of education in agri business, it's still very, very limited. I'll be a bit more specific. In the area of tissue culture, that has always been my passion. You know, I've tried so hard to see where I could actually learn plant tissue culture with ease in Ibadan, especially where there's supposed to be a lot of agri centers and learning centers. Can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly.
Okay, but each time I approach such establishments, they always tell me because I'm an individual, I can't have access to the facility. I mean, I don't want to call names now. So I'm wondering, is it possible for us to have decentralized?
There's only one area. There's only one institution. You don't want to mention names. There's only one institution that will go to that purpose. Please go on.
No, I found 2 of them in Ibadan.
Okay.
But I mean, what they're telling me, one was telling me to actually sign up for a degree course, and I'm looking at it that I don't need a degree to do this thing, okay? So is it possible for us to have decentralized learning centers like they have? I mean, I don't want to have to travel all the way to India to be there for 3 months because I want to learn tissue culture, or to go to Israel. Is it possible for us to have short courses, I mean, educational facilities where we can learn such things within short phases, you know? Just asking.
Everything is possible. Everything is possible if we avert our minds to it. But like you said, who is looking at that opportunity? Who is looking at that as an area of opportunity to take advantage of an event like this? Yes, decentralized, what's it called? People are going to lose jobs. There will be people in that area that will lose jobs at this time. But instead of that person to be reprinting their CVs and looking in areas where they cannot find what's it called, who has identified that need, like you have identified, and see themselves as being able to fill that gap. This is for us the beginning of a season of enterprise.
Yes.
We either get that into our heads or we lose the opportunity. So what you say is eminently possible, being that the need is available to people. But who is looking at those needs? Another thing I will say is that as the agriculture community, perhaps with me, one of the most famous agricultural universities and research centers in the world is Wageningen in the Netherlands.
Okay.
But do we need to have example at the horticultural space and saying this is what the challenge should be? And it doesn't have to be from the academia that the idea can come. Folks like you who know where it pinches can also begin to throw up those ideas. I started studying the cooperative movement a while ago, and I have developed some models that I think make a lot of sense. For example, I think that we should not leave education only in the hands
of government.
Of government. I think that a lot of the exorbitant fees we pay in the
it's not even needed.
In the, what?
No, go on, sir.
A lot of the exorbitant fees we pay in the urban centers for the same, we can give children the same quality of education in the rural areas, in, so to speak, private schools. So where are the young people who are graduating from our faculties of education that we can begin to form into cooperatives and begin to build schools for them, begin to fund schools for them in the rural areas for the children of farmers, starting with one class at a time. So when the children are supposed to get to primary 2, we build classroom number 2 and we fill classroom number 1 again on the cooperative principle. Now, who are people like Mrs. Okutiyan who know what the challenges of tissue culture is, who can form themselves together into a group? You can call it a cooperative, you can call it whatever you want, but form yourself into a group and introduce somebody that has that knowledge base. I don't know what your own background is. I studied agriculture, though I don't know.
I did botany.
Okay, you did botany.
Yeah.
So you can find botanists and plant scientists and folks to come into that group. Can we then begin to look at what the challenges are in that space and put solutions together? At the initial stage, we may need to do it gratis until the market understands the value that we bring to the table. Then we can begin to charge for it. So we don't need to wait for any research institutes. Those research institutes are actually supposed to be serving you because they are being paid, they are being funded with your taxpayer money. So if they say no, fine, but you can also put them out of business. Form folk that know what the challenges are and put something together that is relevant to the needs of the market. At some point in time, you'll be able to charge for that service.
Thank you.
Okay, I actually attempted a small laboratory in my BQ. Maybe when we progress a bit more, we'll let you come inspect.
I'll appreciate that. I'll look for it.
Okay, thank you, sir.
We're running out of time. It's been very exciting. I want to close with a few questions to you, sir. First and foremost, we're in church. So it's important we talk about our faith. You don't think, like everybody else, you haven't spoken once about government this morning. You haven't spoken once about, you haven't complained about the situation we have in the country. You've not moaned or groaned about coronavirus. How did you come to have this kind of mindset? I was telling you a few days ago that you remind me of a world famous economist called Paul Zane-Pilzer, who completely looks at this whole thing as one of the greatest opportunities for mankind and for people who can see the opportunities in innovation and creativity. How did you get here, and how can we apply this in our lives? How did your faith bring you here?
Well, I think if you want to know where I've gotten to and how good I am at worrying, you should ask my wife. She's the one that bears the brunt of it. But one thing I also believe is that life is what you see. I note problems, I see challenges, and I also try to think around them to look at what is the solution. I pray about them. I pray so hard about them that one day at family altar, after we had family altar, my son had to come and meet me to say, Daddy, you know that it's what you see that you will get. But if you continue to see problems, that is what you are going to get. He's 16 years old, just thinking that I'm happy that he has gotten to that realization earlier than I did. But I think it's really what you see. What I choose to see in this emerging scenario are the opportunities for it. Who is going to benefit from the possibility that Nigeria can industrialize based on this global pandemic? Who is going to begin to take a greater look at creating jobs? Because we can no longer export our jobs by importing food that is produced outside the country. Who is going to look at how do we curb post-harvest losses, like Mr. Abikoye said? So if you look at that gamut of possibilities, it's difficult for you to begin to see the challenges. It's more prudent for you to begin to look at how do I take advantage of these opportunities. So, like I said, you must try to get to the future before the future happens.
Yes.
You must get to the future before your dreams.
Yeah.
I have been dreaming for a long time, and I'm happy to say that I've shared a number of personal things with you in the past. So right now, a lot of those things, I didn't know Corona was going to come.
Yeah.
I wasn't around when the Spanish flu happened.
Yeah.
So I had no way. But it was, like I said, scanning your environment and looking at what is deficient in this environment and how do I fix it. At some point in time, it is going to add up. So my charge to people is, yes, we have reason to be scared. We don't want to die. But if we don't die, what then?
What are we going to do? Yeah, absolutely.
So I think for me that's a challenge. It's not easy. Like I said, ask my wife. She thinks I have a doctorate degree in worry. So I think about them, I express those thoughts. But beyond thinking and expressing those thoughts, I also do something about them to get myself prepared for any eventuality.
Well, thank you so much. I think in a way we've hooked up to the next service, because we're going to be talking about discovery. How do we discover ourselves in this particular time, and how do we tap into it? I really am very excited about the things you've said this morning, particularly the cooperative and so on and so forth. We've been talking about cooperative as a church 10 years, 12 years now. We've had models. Pastor Lumide is our leader. But we found out a lot of cooperatives are narrow in their field, just borrowing money to themselves. Many of them don't see themselves as investment portfolios or investment vehicles. Yes.
My sense, when you mention them borrowing money to themselves, there's really nothing wrong with borrowing.
Yeah.
But when you are borrowing, are you borrowing for consumption or are you borrowing for investment?
That's what
I'm more focused on the folks that are borrowing for investment, because there's going to be value addition. Whatever you consume is gone. It ends in the lottery.
Yeah.
So those cooperatives that we are talking about are more focused, are more particular about people forming themselves into cooperatives that are charged towards investment. I'm sorry I interrupted.
Yeah, no, I needed to clarify that, because a lot of cooperatives were, I want to buy a television, I want to buy a car, I want to buy this, I want to get married. You know what I mean? So I'm joining the cooperative, which is why it's very important that we look again at the opportunities in cooperatives going forward. So I totally agree with you on that. We're going to have you back at 9:30 for the network service. Thank you very much for making this time. I'm sure everybody is blessed this morning. There's no time for me to round up with scripture and all that, but I think lessons have been learned. But we're going to have him back at 9:30. We're moving slightly into discovery. What can you do at this particular time? How everybody can discover an opportunity in this particular pandemic, and that's what I want us to focus on. So thank you once again, Mr. Abikoye. We truly appreciate it. Please give our best to your wife and the children. So we'll be back. We're going to take a short song, and then we'll come back, pray for the nation, pray for the church, and then we'll go right back to Mr. Abikoye at 9:30. So please join us. You can also join us on Zoom. We can take up to 100 people. So if you still want to join us on Zoom, they will put the link so you can ask your own